This is Michaela J., the voice of the corporation, and you're listening to SyncBook Radio from thesyncbook.com.
I suppose you're thinking about the cottage, Phil.
Yes, I did think about that.
So have I. You must know that. And it wouldn't work, Phil. It would just be too uncomfortable for Dave, knowing he'd moved into one of those neighborhoods. Darling, don't you see that? It's detestable, but that's the way it is. It's even worse in New Canaan. There, nobody can sell or rent to a Jew. And even in Darien, where Jane's house is and my house is, there's sort of a gentleman's agreement when you...
Gentleman's? Kathy, you can't... You're not going to fight it, Kathy. You're just going to give in. Play along. Just let their idiotic rules stand.
I don't play along. But what can one person do?
You can tell them to go jump in the lake. What can they do?
Plenty. Ostracize him. Some of the markets not deliver food, not even wait on him. The series will be over by the time we get there. Phil, face facts.
You expect us to live in that cottage once I know all this?
You can't make over the whole world. You know I'm on Dave's side.
Well, I'm not on Dave's side or any side except against their side. Kathy, do you or don't you believe in this? Because if you do, how can you talk about... Tom, will you please? Kathy and I are talking.
But, Pop,
Tom, what is it? What's the matter? Did you have a fight? Argument with one of the guys?
they call me a dirty Jew and a stinking kite. And they ran off and
Oh, darling, it's not true. It's not true. You're no more Jewish than I am. It's just a horrible mistake.
Kathy! Come with me, Tom. We'll talk about it in a minute. Some water? What did happen? Jimmy in it? Somebody socked somebody?
no, they just yelled. It was at our corner. One was a kid from school. They were playing hop, and I asked, could I play too? And the school said no dirty little Jew could play with them. And they all yelled those other things. I started to speak, and then they all yelled. My father has a long, curly beard and turned and ran. Why did they, Pop? Why?
Adolf Hitler is still alive. I slept with her last night. Come out from behind that false mustache, Adolf. I know you're in there.
You're all a bunch of Jews. Andras Jones here, and that's what the hero and the villain in the movie in my mind says as he bursts through the church doors. My hero may look a little different than yours, but Joseph Campbell taught us that though he or she may have 1,000 faces, it's usually the same hero. And in America, that hero usually looks like some cowboy version of Jesus. Be it Neo, or Luke Skywalker, or Katniss, all symbolic sync associations seem to lead back to that magical murdered Jew who hangs perpetually at the heart of our mythologies. You see, to me, Christians are just hyper-reformed Jews. If you worship a thing, you become that thing. And I know a lot of you will say that you're not Christians, you're pagans or Buddhists or atheists, which is cool. I'm a little bit all of those too, but I loved movies and books and TV and music when I was growing up. I still do. And that means I've been indoctrinated with Christian, aka Jewish mythologies, without ever attending a Christian church, or even a synagogue for that matter. And so have you. It's in the cultural air we breathe. Abrahamic religions. Religious and non-religious Americans of all stripes are a kind of Christian, myself included, and to me that makes us all a bunch of Jews. So, as a bunch of Jews just hanging out talking sync, let's take a look at anti-Semitism, shall we? Your impulse about now is going to be to stop listening, and maybe to wish that I would just stop talking. This is what happens when Jews bring up anti-Semitism. It's not just Christians or anti-Semites who will try and shut you up. Heck, other Jews will sometimes come down the hardest on you. It's not like all Jews understand the workings of anti-Semitism. We feel it, we experience it, but I never got a grasp on it until I started working with reevaluation counseling and their very important work with oppression theory, which is based on the simple idea that society at large is oppressive to everyone's humanity, and, depending on the culture or constituency you come from, it hits you in particular ways. Now, even though I figure everyone who is a Christian, and remember, that includes all you Star Wars or Matrix fans, is a kind of Jew, not all of us are the targets of anti-Semitism. Imagine back in Roman times. Jews were crucified while Christians were thrown to the lions, or so the story goes. You see, different forms of oppression, but the result was the same. The house, in this case Rome, wins every time. American kids who weren't raised in explicitly Jewish households, where members of the family may have been victims of genocide, pogroms, blacklisting, and general old-school Jew hatred in the 19th and 20th centuries, may not have spent a lot of time thinking about Nazis. I mean, maybe you went through a phase where you stared into the dark history of fascism, but you probably haven't spent your life on a day-to-day basis with Nazis haunting your consciousness as the end result of every slightly or overtly anti-Semitic situation you encounter in the world. Perhaps this is an unrealistic view, and perhaps it is the most realistic view. My point in sharing it is that worrying about Nazis is as much a part of my experience as a Jew as anything else. In fact, as a secular American Jew, worrying about Nazis might be the most Jewish thing about me. And now, we, here in the realm of Sync, find ourselves embroiled with fears of, quote, white genocide and theories about a, quote, Jewish virus spouted from sources like Red Ice, a media organization we thought we could trust, with whom we thought we were in alignment. For most of us Jews, and I mean all of us Western Jesus lovers, it's disappointing and bothersome. For some of us Jews, and by this I mean the ones who would be killed if the Nazis were in control, the ones the Nazis consider Jews, well, for us, it's terrifying. And if I am to be honest, personally, a little gratifying and exhilarating. I mean, I've been preparing to fight Nazis my whole life, and here they are. And then, there's Israel. On the most recent episode, number 16, of Frater and Mater X's The Middle Chamber, I was invited to join a discussion of Red Ice with Alan Abedessa-Green and Professor Jim Fetzer. The X's had intended to interview Henrik and Lana from Red Ice, particularly about their support for a film called The Greatest Story Never Told, which seeks to rehabilitate Hitler's memory. But the Red Icers dropped out at the last minute, and Alan stepped in on behalf of SyncBook to fill the void. I had noticed with some confusion that Frater X had come out online in support of this pro-Hitler film, asking people to, quote, keep an open mind and to, quote, not kill the messenger. So when Alan said he was going to be on the show, I told him that was a conversation I'd like to be a part of. Unfortunately, before I could participate in the conversation, beyond making a general statement that I am opposed to Nazis, the professor began berating me about Israel. He insisted I agree with him that Israel is a genocidal nation just like the Nazis. When I wasn't ready to accept his simplifications and deliberately charged language, he became insulting, basically accusing me of supporting war crimes. I asked him why he was asking me about Israel, a country I have never been to, have no vote in, and am not an expert about. But the professor just couldn't see me as anything but a Jew, and therefore an agent, witting or unwitting, of Israel. Imagine a black American author being invited onto a show to discuss censorship, who is then asked to agree that problems in the Congo or Rwanda prove that black people are even worse than white slave owners, before he is allowed to engage the topic he was invited to discuss. That would be racism, flat out, and I think we could all see it. But when it's anti-Semitism, it's easier to not see. You see? I never really got to talk about Red Ice on that show. I'm embarrassed to say that I allowed the professor's bullying to cow me and shut me up on the issue at hand. And that, my friends and fellow Jews, is one of the ways anti-Semitism works. That's certainly what's been happening around the world with rising anti-Jewish violence from the UK to France to Italy to Germany to Turkey and even to Olympia, where the temple many of us walked by during the Sync Summit this summer was recently vandalized. The graffiti in Olympia was tame compared to the situation in Europe, where pro-Palestinian rallies have turned into attacks on individual Jews and Jewish organizations. It's hard not to see this projection of the sins of the Israeli government onto individual Jews around the world as a continuation of the centuries of attacks on Jews for other crimes we have not committed, like the pillaging of German banks, the murdering of Christian babies, or the crucifixion of that unfortunate radical rabbi from Bethlehem. There is a cultural impulse to punish Jews for our own sins, encouraged over centuries by churches and governments, and often by those we love. The actions of the Israeli government, disturbing as they are a convenient cover for that impulse, as demonstrated by Professor Jim Fetzer's behavior towards me on the X's show. For the record, the X's invited the professor back, but when I spoke openly in an online forum about my experience on their show, they mocked my experience in public, insulted me in private, and then blocked me. These folks, who encouraged us to keep our minds open to Hitler, killed the Jewish messenger pointing out anti-Semitism on their own show. This isn't a personal beef with the X's or even with the professor. Maybe they are anti-Semites, maybe they aren't. That's not a label I lay on people unless, like Hitler and his followers, they lay it on themselves. There is a difference, though, between being an anti-Semite and doing or saying something anti-Semitic. I'm a pretty sensitive guy, but I am a guy, and society is still pretty sexist, so I probably do or say at least one thing that could be construed as sexist every day. My intent doesn't really have anything to do with it. Just because I'm trying not to be sexist doesn't mean that I never will be, so when it's pointed out to me, I try and listen and potentially correct or amend my behavior based on the new knowledge. At the very least, gaining awareness of the way sexism works and taking responsibility for it makes a difference in what kind of a friend, coworker, neighbor, or fellow citizen I am with the women with whom I share the world. It actually behooves me not necessarily to think about myself as a woman, but to personalize the experience women share with me about how sexism affects them and how I might fall into perpetuating that pattern, just as I am asking you, my fellow Jews of all stripes, to do in relationship to anti-Semitism. Well, just as I was working on this piece and finishing it up, someone shared a video of the great Motown artist Smokey Robinson, who created songs like Tears of a Clown, Just My Imagination, and Please Mr. Postman, sharing a piece about being black in America. I'm going to close this offering with a selection that may frighten those of you who have put all your chips on saving the white race, just as much as it may trouble some of you to think of yourselves as Jews, even by my very broad definition. That's okay. One of the things Sync keeps teaching me is that sometimes it's good to meet the thing you've always feared.
Since those first ships arrived here from Africa that came across the sea, there were already black men in this country who were free. And as for those who came over on those terrible boats, they were called nigger and slave and told what to do and how to behave. And then Master started tripping, doing his midnight tipping down to the slave shacks where he forced he and great-great-grandma to be together. And if great-great-grandpa protested, he got tarred and feathered. And at the same time, the black men in the country who were free were mating with the tribes like the Apache and the Cherokee. And as a result of all that, we're a parade of every shade. And in this late day and age, you can be sure there ain't too many of us in this country whose bloodline is pure. But according to a geographical genealogy study published in Time magazine, the black African people were the first on the scene. So for what it's worth, the black African people were the first on Earth, and through migration, our characteristics started to change and rearrange to adapt to whatever climate we migrated to. And that's how I became me, and you became you. So if we're going to go back, let's go all the way back. And if Adam was black and Eve was black, then that kind of makes it a natural fact that everybody in America is an African American. Everybody in Europe is an African European. Everybody in the Orient is an African Asian, and so on and so on. That is, if the origin of man is what we're going to go on. And if one drop of black blood makes you black like they say, then everybody's black anyway.